Hi everyone, I wanted to do a edit on a photo and I thought I would go from, not knowing what I'm going to do to hopefully coming out with a final product that looks good. So yeah, this is just going to be a true reflection of how I actually do my editing. So I've actually gone through and found an image I like. I thought I'd speed up that process by not wasting time trying to find one I like, but pretty much it's all about getting an image that's sharp. If you can see and zoom in, this is shot on the phase 1 with a 28mm lens, and it's pretty reasonable, pretty good sharpness. So I'm in Capture One. I know that I'm going to probably put a new sky in. I'm going to do some work on the foreground. I'm going to try and lighten these rocks. Who knows? I could go in any direction. This is how these things work. The first thing I always look at when I'm in Capture One is I just look at the white balance. I'll grab my little white balance tool here, and I'll just click around in different spots to see what I quite like that one. What I like the colour of the rocks and the colour of the water. Takes my eye. That's too warm. That's kind of too greeny. It's a bit yellowy greeny. And yeah, just go through and find a colour that I like. And something like that is pretty good. That's not good. Find that if I click on these rocks here, they seem to come up with a fairly good idea of what I'm after. Yeah, that's not bad. The water looks kind of white. This can still look a little bit blue. Oh, let's add a bit more light and a bit more color into those blues there. So I'm going to go down here. Whoopsies, sorry. Go back to my color editor, and I'm going to click on the advanced tab. Grab this little icon here, and then click on those blues in there. I'm going to look at the lightness to see what that does overall. See, if you go too much, you start to blow the areas of white out here in the water, so you want to be a little bit mindful of that. I'm going to grab the saturation, and there we got some nice saturation there, nice color in those areas. I'm just looking at those highlights there. Let's go right down, let's go right up. I think we'll leave the lightness, we'll take it down a little bit actually, so that's pretty good. Next thing I'll do is I'll look at the rocks. If I click on a color there, I can expand this out a little bit to pick up more of the colors in those rocks. Make sure I got them all. And let's see what we can do with those. A little bit of color there and a bit of lightness. And I'll just look at the hue. I think I might make them bring the hue more yellow or a bit more red. I think a bit more yellow, just a smidgen. Grab the saturation slider, crank it. That's the Peter Eastway look. So we're going to go somewhere between Peter and someone that shoots black and white. That's probably alright, something like that. Okay, other things to look at. Have you got your, I just use this default sharpening. You can see it there, 160/110. That's just the default sharpening that comes with Capture One. I never do anything else with that. The other thing is I want to look at the profile, and I know that because it's an older phase 1 lens that I'm using, I need to go in and set this here to the 28mm phase 1 digital AF. Okay, so that's the corrections that I need to do. Again, I'll just zoom in, just make sure everything looks alright, doesn't look too bad. Seen worse, seen better, but we've got plenty of pixels there to deal with. Okay, I'm going to, look, I can go in there now and I could put a gradient on that sky and darken that down, but I don't really want to because I'm going to actually put a new sky in there. I'm going to hit this little wheel here and that'll process that file out. And if you have a look at my recipes, I'm exporting it out as a 16-bit TIFF with the profile of DCAM3. Okay, let's go back to there. Let's see, come on. DCAM3, 240 pixels per inch. And it's going to open with Adobe Photoshop. Okie dokie. You can see there that the file size is 458 megabytes. from this Phase 1 IQ 280, which is just a baby file these days when you're talking about Phase 1. But it's, you know, it looks nice. It's a nice looking image. I mean, some people might be happy with that straight up. I always like to I like to put a little border around my images before I start editing, just to see where it's at, and it kind of makes it look almost finished in some ways, like it's framed. So Command Option or Control Alt C to bring up the canvas size. Make sure your relative box is ticked, and I'll put a 9" by 9" border of white around it. And there it is. And I'll sit back and I'll have a look at it now, and I'll go, okay. I'll look at it small, I'll look at it big, and just get an idea of, you know, if it's where I'm at, if I'm happy where it's at. Okay. Next thing I'll do is I'll look at my adjustments. I'll go to a levels adjustment layer, see where the histogram is setting. You can see that we've got a lot of white in the sky, obviously. Not much in the mid-tones, and we've got a few dark areas there. So one real quick and easy way of fixing those things is, I do it all the time, so I'll do a curves adjustment layer and I'll change the blend mode down to screen. That'll lighten up that foreground there. I'll invert that mask, Command I or Control I. Go B for brush, painting with white as my foreground color there. If that's not white, if it's different sorts of colors, you can hit D, which is the default, and then X will toggle between the black and white. I need to paint white onto a black mask, so here we go. I've got my, I'm using a Wacom Cintiq 27 HD screen, so now I'm going to brush. I can use my brush directly onto the screen, which makes things much easier. I'm going to go do a 30% opacity, bring my brush up a little bit big like that, and I'm just going to slowly brush some light through that foreground area there, just to a point where it makes it a little bit nice. I'll probably leave it a little bit darker in the absolute foreground, but I'm just adding a little bit of light through there just to make it look a little bit more interesting. The top of those rocks gives it a bit more of a hit, almost like you've sort of got a bit of a spotlight. But you know, you end up with these, a lot of the time you end up with these dark holes in your images, and the light's not where you want it to be. So to make your image look good, you really need to lighten certain areas. So you can see there now, all of a sudden we've just got a bit more life through that foreground. I'm not one for saving layers and, you know, stacking all these layers up. If I'm happy with what it's done, I'll just flatten it. So Command Shift E, and that flattens it down, or Control Shift E if you're on a PC. Now I'm going to pick up that sky and whack a new one in. So I'll just go to a quick selection tool, hit W on the keyboard, and I've already got the quick selection tool selected. I'll use my square bracket, right square bracket, just to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to do a quick roughie around there. As you can see, it's picked up the rocks okay, but it's also gone into the water. That's fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit L on the keyboard, Shift L, to bring up this tool, the lasso tool, and it's the, I don't know what they bloody call it. What do they call it? Hang on, let me hover over there, I'll tell you what it's called. The polygonal lasso tool, and then you can get a straight edge. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom in a little bit, see what I've got, and I'm going to just run it along that area there. Look, there is a bit of land there. I have to hold down the Option key so that you see that turn into a little negative, and that's going to subtract from the mask. So I'm just going to run it along the top of that there. The horizons are generally pretty straight, so I'm just going to get over that little bit of land, and then I'm going to run a straight line across there, coming out the other side, and then just go around there and then join up, and that takes it away, gives us a nice straight edge on the horizon. Again, I'm going to Option click on that horizon there, and this time I'm going to go all the way through because it should be flat and straight, and then just draw around there, line that up. Same thing here, Option click. This is all the boring stuff really. Just just things you've got to do. Alright, so that should be okay. Actually, I should zoom in, just make sure that I've selected those rocks pretty good. You can get really picky about your selections, but a lot of the time I'm just going afterwards. If there's a few white edges to worry about, then I'll go in afterwards and fix them up in post with a bit of cloning and stuff like that. Using this Cintiq, it's much easier to do all that. You can select things really easily. And alright, okie dokie, it's looking alright. It's a bit dodgy there, Fletch, so maybe option click there down to there and then just draw it straight line. There's a little bit there, but that's way off into the distance. Okay, so there is my selection. I'm going to invert that, Command Shift I, and I'm just going to go Command J to cut that out and put it up on its own layer. So now you can see that the sky's been cut out completely. Alright, I could have done things a little bit differently, but I always say to people, they say, why don't you just add a layer mask and blah blah blah. So I quite like to cut things up. It makes sense to me to have it like that. I know adding a layer mask is kind of like cutting it up, and you can go back and forwards and refine, but this is the way I've always worked, so it works for me. Okay, next thing I need to do is go find a new sky. So let's go back to my Capture One 12, and I'm just going to have a look, see here if I can find some skies. So let's go back to this little folder here, and I'm going to go through my hard drive, and I think I have a raw sky SKY. Where are you, Sky? Raw skies. Got a couple of skies here. Can't use that one. Already used that for something else. And these ones are shot with a different focal length. I've got much more skies, and this is just it's just one little lot. Now I think I will probably use these are all shot with the 80mm. This one wasn't. Yes, it was. I love my 80mm. That's going to look too wrong. The wrong time of the day. It's shot with 150mm, so that's not going to work. Tell you what, let's just go with one of these. Let's try this one. Yep, that'll do. So I'll just export that out. Won't worry about mucking around with it too much. The colours will probably hopefully work in. They're a little bit purple, but we can change that. Now I know that the sun is going to be in the wrong spot if I put this one straight on like that, but that's okay. I'm just going to drop it on there, and then I'm going to go Command T to put the transform tool on it, and then right mouse click and flip horizontal, hit return, and that way the sun's pretty much in the right spot. So these ones must have been shot with the 60 megapixel phase camera that I had, P65 Plus. So now I'm just going to transform this sky and just bring that out, and I may make it a little bit taller, just pulling it up like that, and just make sure that the horizon's pretty close to where it should be. Line it up, something like that, hit return, and there's our new sky. Now it's a bit too cut out looking, so what I like to do when I do this is I'll duplicate that sky layer, Command J, and I'll change the blend mode down to screen on the top layer, and then it starts to look a little bit more realistic. So that opacity is still a little bit too bright, so I'm just going to pull that opacity back on that, say to 50%, and then I'm going to add a layer mask, and I'm going to go G for gradient, and I'm just going to hold down the shift key, and I'm going to draw a gradient like something like that, so the sky at the top gets a little bit darker. If I disable that, it's before and after, so just bringing some of that back. If you take that off, you can see what we're effectively doing is just lightening up around the horizon, which helps with your edges. If you zoom in and look at your edges, see when it's too cut out, it doesn't look right. If you lighten it up, it just fixes up any issues with the edges. It's a really good way of doing it. The other thing you can do is you can click on this top layer, duplicate it, Command or Control J, go back to the bottom one and change the blend mode to multiply, and that can sometimes fix up any edges as well. Let's turn that on and off and see if it's done anything. Let's zoom in. It may have made it worse. It's not too bad. Very hard to see, but it just darkens the edge a little bit. So there we have our image with our sky. I think the sky is a little bit, the color's a little bit too magenta. So what we'll do is we'll just go in and do a color balance here, and we're going to clip this little layer down to the one underneath by just clicking that little icon, and then I'm just going to add a bit more cyan through there, a bit of green, a bit of yellow, and see how that hasn't done a damn thing. There we go. It just didn't work on that layer there, so I'm just doing it on the layer underneath. Now you can see if it's gone way too far. That's okay, we'll just drop the opacity back, take it back to 0, and pull it up slowly until you think that the sky color and the watercolor kind of match a bit better, which is somewhere around there, which I think is quite nice. So, you know, you could say that this is pretty much finished. I think it's part the way there. I don't think it's completely finished yet. I'm a bit concerned about this edge over here, that the horizon's not too bad, but over here, see this? It's a bit weird looking. So I think that almost needs to be lightened up a bit more. So what I could do is I could duplicate that layer again and see how that's lightened up that corner. It makes that corner look a little bit better. So let's go back out, and if I look at the whole thing overall, I like what it's done over on the left here, but I don't like what it's done over on the right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to click on the layer mask. I'm going to go Option Delete or Alt Delete, and that's going to fill it all with white, and then I'm going to go Command I to invert that and make it all black. So now that extra lightness is there, but it's hidden behind that black mask. I'm going to beef a brush, and I'm just going to lighten that corner up with a low opacity. Let's try 20%, and it's only going to affect that area there. And as you see, I can just brush along there. I'm trying to make it look like it blends nicely, and if I click that on and off, all of a sudden that corner has been improved like that. Okie dokie. So on and off, that's better. Okay, now we can go in there and we can make those tops of those peaks look like they've been touched by the sunlight. So let's go back to the top here, and I'm going to Command click on this layer. If I do that, it'll reselect everything perfectly. You can see it's just like making a selection again. So I'm going to, before I do that, I'm just going to undo that, Command Z or Control Z. I'm going to do a new layer on top. Let's go and do, what are we going to do? Let's try let's go back to color balance. And I'm just going to add no, I'm not going to do color balance. Let's do something else. Let's go do a LUT, 3D LUT adjustment. And I'm going to choose, let's have a look through some of these that I know. I've got a whole heap of these LUTs. That one there, that's fixed skin tones, it always works quite well. But I'm going to have a look at the saturation one. Put a bit of Peter Eastway on everything, doesn't it? It's not probably what I'm chasing. It's sort of more of like a orange twist. No, that's not good either. What's that one I'm looking for? It's only warm. No, that's shocking. It's taken all the colours out except for the warm ones. Now there's one there it's come standard with Photoshop. Of course, I have so many, it makes it difficult to find them sometimes. It's pretty much like a here we go, edgy amber. Pooh, look at that. That's a shocker. That's darkened it as well. Edgy amber's just ruined everything. Okay, 4 colours. Okay, let's try that. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Well, let's just try it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to invert that so that the effect's there, but it's hidden. I'm now going to go in and command click on that layer to bring up this selection. B for brush. And I'm going to just paint on the top of those rocks there. This bit of extra orange. I'm going to hit. There's our 100% and hit the top of those rocks with a bit of sunlight hitting the tops there. Probably going to look stupid, but anyway, we'll give it a go. Command D to deselect, and then all of a sudden we've got, looks a bit more like the sun's hitting there, but we probably need to add a bit more light now, which is good. We've got this selection already made. So we're going to go up to a curve adjustment layer, and we're just going to pull this up. Looking at the rocks, we want it to be a bit contrasty as well, because when sunlight hits, it needs to look like there's a bit more contrast, because generally it does. If the sunlight hits something, you'll see darker shadows and brighter highlights. So you add a bit of a contrast curve through there. And now to make it match what we've already done and to hide it from everything else, all we need to do is click on this layer mask, hold down the Option or the Alt key, Alt if you're on a PC, and click and drag up to there, and it'll just put it then on that area there. But you can see I've stuffed up because I've it's actually hitting this part of the horizon there. So that's alright. I'll just go in, click that layer mask, B for brush, make sure black is my foreground colour, and using my Cintiq screen I can get in nice and close, and I'll just fix that area up so that I don't have any. It's just that water because it wasn't it was included in the selection. And over there, this is a little bit rough as guts, but I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from, and you'll, if you had the time, you'll do this much better than I'm doing. Wow, look at that horizon. That's a bit of a shocker. Gonna have to fix that one up. Okay, I'm pretty happy now. I'm easily pleased. So we should have, it's looking, it's not super convincing, but not too bad. That area there, okay, that's alright. This just looks a bit funny here, but that's actually just the colour of the light. B for brush. I'll just see if I can hide that a little bit somehow, just so that the sunlight's looking a bit more like it. I might go up a bit. Yeah, so now we've got on and off. So there's off, on. It's reasonably convincing. Yeah, why not? Okay, looking at it. Alright, next thing I'm going to do, I'm pretty happy. I'll have to fix up this edge over here. Everything else looks like it kind of goes together. Maybe just some of these foreground rocks, let's just add a bit of light to those. So let's go up and do a curve adjustment layer, change the blend mode to screen, and we're just going to increase the contrast a little bit. And invert that mask. So I'm just looking at those rocks in the foreground. We're going to zoom in And I'm just going to add, with the low opacity brush, painting with white as my foreground colour. Just add a bit of light to some of these rocks here. Make that a bit bigger. And just try and follow where the light is hitting. And just if you hit some areas and not others, it'll just give it a bit more roundness and more dimension, which always looks good. And if it's too strong, we can adjust it. Let's see how that looks. Let's go out a bit. Looking at those rocks in the foreground, probably a bit hot. You can see there's a bit of an issue, and just drop it back. Not there. There. Yep. So just a little bit, not too much. We don't want it to stand out that much. Okay, so that is that. Now at this stage I'll flatten that down. Command Shift E or Control Shift E. And I'm thinking it probably could do with a bit of a lift. So if I go Command A, Command T, I'm going to drag this point up and drag this point down. Hit Return. Command or Control Z, just before and after. Just gives it a bit more va-va-voom. Alright, it's looking alright. Deselect. Happy with that. I guess at this stage I probably should save this little sucker because I've been mucking around. Command Shift S. I'm going to save it to my Drobo 2 here, and I'm going to call it something. Where is it? It's Canal Rocks. So Canal Rocks. God knows what number I'm going to give it. Let's make it a 6660. So it's not too satanic. PH. I probably already got that number in there somewhere anyway. I'll just make these codes up and hope to hell I haven't done it already, which I have in some cases. Okay, so that's saved. It's kind of getting there. It's pretty cheesy. Again, I'll go now to Command Option C with a 9-inch border around, and just to have a look. It looks like what it looks like with a frame around it. And you know, it's not too bad. It's pretty okay. The sky is reasonably convincing. The sunlight hitting the top is reasonably convincing. I'm going to go back here and have a look at my history. I'm going to do a snapshot and just go back and go, okay, where we started, where we ended up, before, after. So you can see it's looking a little bit more interesting. I wouldn't say it's the best photo I've ever taken, but you get an idea of how I do my adjustments and how I do stuff. Let's have a look. Do we really want to sort of stylize it a bit more? One of my favorite tricks in the old days was Command J, duplicate the layer, go up to Image, down to Apply Image, and we're going to add a multiply blend mode to the red channel, which makes it kind of dark and grungy. Click OK. You can see it's way dark and grungy. And then what I would do is I'd add layer mask, B for brush, and then I'd think about where the sun's coming, sunlight, and then I would just drag a line down through. Obviously it's not going to work if you have painting white on white, so change X on the keyboard, change that to black. 30% opacity, 3 on the keyboard will do that. And then you can just start to bring some more light through. And just focus the light through like that. And this is, you know, how a lot of my stuff looked in the past. Just lighten that a bit more. So it's fairly heavy, fairly dark. Let's have a look. Is it worthwhile? So cheery, cheesy, not so cheery, not so cheesy. I don't know, I kind of like the darker version. just looks a bit more stylized, doesn't it? What do you reckon? Shall I leave it? Thanks for your advice. Okay. I'll just get a bit more light on the sides of these. Obviously being careful not to create any halos. Halos are bad. And dodgy enough. Let's try it again. Before and after. Yeah, I reckon I can get away with that. Probably shouldn't have any light. Whoa! What the hell? Okay, don't go messing it. 1%. Let's drop the opacity back a little bit. That side should be a little bit darker. That light's coming through. Yeah, I'm kind of liking that a bit more. Maybe this foreground has got a little bit too dark. So if I just, with a low opacity, just start to bring that up a bit. I'm going the wrong way. Idiot. X on the keyboard. There you go. I was wondering why it was looking so dark. You want to kind of be dark, but you don't really want to crush your blacks too much. So just give it little tickles here and there. This corner might be a bit dark. And then let's turn that on and off. Before, after. Yeah, it's not too bad. Let's flatten that. Save it. Add our border around it. Close enough for jazz, as they say. Anything else? No. I reckon that's a wrap. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. This is basically how I work my images. So I'm just talking through what I would go and do on a regular basis. It hasn't been pre-scripted. It's just raw and ready. So, you know, you either love it or you hate it. And there's probably more I can do. I could probably add, you know, mid-tone contrast layers and stuff like that. And actually, let's have a look at that before I sign off. Let's go and do what I would do with a mid-tone contrast. I would do a duplicate the photograph, Command J. Then I go up to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. And you can see that's amount of 1450. You can see how that's really sharpens a lot of that stuff. If I go into 100%, kind of grey, kind of crunchy, but I'm a bit reluctant at times to go too hard on it. So if I do it, I like to add it on and then take it off, so if you know what I mean. So let's do that. Now add a layer mask at the bottom here, invert it, Command I, and I think the foreground can do it, because things in the foreground should be more detailed. They should be clearer, crispier, more contrasty, and they should get a little bit faded as they go backwards. So if you go too hard with this contrast, it can be not nice. If I wanted to be more accurate with that, where I'd brush this in, I'll just do a quick selection around the rocks like that, and I'll pick up this area as well, so that when I'm adding the contrast through, I'm just going to add it to the rocks, like so. So now I go back to my layer here, B for brush, bring this down a little bit, and then just add, and I'm kind of going to be a little bit hit and miss with it, and just hit some of it maybe not. All this stuff just kind of helps to just to make it look a little bit more organic, not so digital and done. Yeah, to look too crunchy. You can't look too crunchy because then it just doesn't look, I don't know, doesn't look good. Trust me. There you go. Bit of that, bit of that. And just make sure I get around the base of those rocks there where there would be a bit of wispy, crispy stuff going on. Okay, and if we look at it on before and after, you should see just a slight kick up in those rocks, which is nice, but we're not affecting the water behind it or the sky, we're just keeping that the way it is. You can't probably tell from a distance. It's not too bad, you pick it up a little bit. Yeah, flatten that, Command Shift D, Control Shift D, save it, Command S or Control S, and there we have it. One pretty cool, let's make a smaller border this time. Pretty cool image. Wow. You let me know if you think it's a cool image. That's right. It's a good spot actually. This is Canal Rocks, and it's down. Most people go to the main part of Canal Rocks, which is, you know, probably on the surface is the most spectacular part. But this is a little bit further down towards the end, before the next big bay that you have before then heading around to Widerup. And I just love the shape of these rocks here. It's quite an interesting spot. The only thing I haven't thought about, this is my horizon straight. So Command R to bring up the rulers, and just grab a ruler from there. Yeah, that's straight. Real straight. Nice work. Okay, so how am I going to straighten this? What would I do? What I like to do is like this. I go Command A, Command T, right mouse click, go to skew, and just bring it up this way so that it's pretty much straight. Hit return, and it's kind of cool because it makes it a bit bigger and fatter on the left, and you lose a bit of the sky, but I'm not too fussed about that. That's one way of doing it. I mean, you could crop it the proper way, but I don't know, am I lazy or is this just the way I should do it? There we go, now it's straight. Save it again, and that is the end of that. Cheers guys.